Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy Maleef, also known as Infosec Sherpa. I'm a senior cybersecurity threat intelligence analyst at Nextera Energy, and I uh, wanted to share some of my knowledge and, to hopefully drop some information. And I do much longer presentations about this, so this is just kind of an aperitif, little taste of what else I can present if you're interested. Okay, let's. So, first and foremost, disclaimer, my thoughts and opinions expressed here are my own and not representative of my employer or of any groups with which I am affiliated. So, just wanted to get that out of the way. So real quick, why was I interested in presenting for VetSec? I myself am not a veteran, but I have lots of my family. So just wanted to kind of show you my street cred here. So on the far left, that's my grandfather in the U.S. Army, World War One. Next photo to the right, that's my late Uncle Bob. He was one of the first to be in the U.S. Army SIGINT Corps, and I have all kinds of cool stories about that from him. The next gentleman in sunglasses, my late father, who was in the Pennsylvania Air National Guard. And then more currently, the photos that are blacked out, those are my nephews and a cousin. Because they're active duty, I wanted to protect their information. And then lastly, I was the events chair for the New York Times Veterans and Allies ERG. So that's my challenge coin for that. So just wanted to kind of show you my connection to the military world and why I'm an ally and a supporter. So why did I pick the tsunami theme and what is this talk all about? I love this quote from Linton Weeks. In the nonstop tsunami of global information, librarians provide us with floaties and teach us to swim. In case you're not aware, I spent a long time before I was in InfoSec as a law firm librarian. I have a master's of library and information science degree from the University of Pittsburgh. Go Panthers. So I know a lot about what it's like to do good research, to do credible research, and also know how overwhelming it can all be. So this is what I want to do is try to demystify some of this for you and help it make it a little bit easier to understand and digest. So first we need to understand the landscape, right? So much information is out there. And this is only from 2 years ago. I'm sure a more updated image is going to be even fuller. But I mean, just take that in for a second. Look at all those different ways not only we can communicate, not only can we share information, but how we can receive information. So we're kind of getting hit from all sides, right? And not all of it is good information. Some of it's bad information. And when you have all of this coming to you at once, it can be really overwhelming and difficult of try to sift through it. So first, I want to make you aware of the landscape. You're not dealing with just the channels on your cable TV. You're dealing with there is still print around. There's still print. There's TV. There's social media. There's all kinds of online things, and these are not even including some of the more like hidden message boards and things like that. So there's a lot of information to take in. So what also is interesting is what comes with information, there comes bad information. So we've basically come to know this as MDM, misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. So let's go over what exactly do those mean. So misinformation is false, but it's not shared with malicious intent. So maybe some gossip, maybe somebody just sharing their hot take on something. But misinformation can very quickly escalate into something sinister and pointed. So that's disinformation, deliberately trying to mislead, manipulate. And this can be done by a country, by a company, by a person, by your relatives. There's a lot of WhatsApp chats or Telegram chats and things like that researchers don't necessarily have insight into, where there's probably lots of dis and malinformation being spread and forming people's opinions, and we just being air quotes being the research community can't even see what's being said. And then the last one to consider is malinformation. It's based on fact, but it's used out of context on purpose to mislead or harm. So just make sure that there's different types of misinformation. Uh, um, and something can be very innocent and then get wildly spun out of control. So let's look at some examples of that. Hopefully you're familiar with Gritty, the NHL National Hockey League Flyers team here in Philadelphia. So let's start with just some misinformation. All of a sudden there's breaking news and it's all over the news that I'm Gritty. I'm revealed to be Gritty. Okay, well that's misinformation. That's not right. Or is it? No, I'm just kidding. It's not right. So that's some misinformation. But look, it's on breaking news. Somebody ran with it. So then what happens? Then that turns into disinformation. So all of a sudden I'm angry Gritty and I want to burn the world down. I'm out of control. Save yourselves. Breaking news on ESPN from Philadelphia. So they took a kernel of that misinformation that was harmless on the surface, and then all of a sudden it gets spun into maybe one of my adversaries wants to turn that into disinformation. So now all of a sudden I'm angry Gritty. And whoops, I've had that twice. There we go. Malinformation. So now the malinformation is, you know what? Let's clarify some things. She's not Gritty at all, but she doesn't even like hockey. That she's really a basketball fan and she hates hockey and she hates you. So that's, malinformation. So let's just look at how quickly did that escalate, right? You had some misinformation that delved into some disinformation that turned into some malinformation. It can happen that quickly. So that's why you need to be aware of the information that you're receiving, how you're processing it, and how you're making connections to things to identify if there is any dis, or mal intent in what you're receiving. So you're probably like, all right, great, lady. Thanks. What's your point to all this? I do have a point. That you need to check yourself before you wreck yourself. It is very important that you adhere to good research practices of consuming information. Obviously, if you're going to push out information, I would advise that you adhere to the same sort of ethics. Don't be the one who's intentionally putting out bad information. That's not cool. That's not okay, especially if you're part of the research community. So one of the first things you can talk about is provenance. Provenance is not a beautiful place in the south of France, like is pictured there, nor is it a delicious, creamy Italian cheese. That's provolone. And Provence is the place in France. Provenance means, the source of the information. What is the provenance of the information which you gathered? A good example of this is, and I'm not throwing them under the bus, but a place like Security Boulevard or the Huffington Post, where they repost other people's articles. Or an even more succinct example of this would be wire feeds. If they pull something off of the Associated Press and then run it publicly, or on their local news website, they can edit things for clarity or length or things like that. So what are they taking out then? So I strongly urge, if you go to a site and you see that, say, the first byline is really says, AP News or Agence France Presse or something like that, stop what you're doing, go to Reuters, go to AP Press, go to whatever wire service that local news station cited and find the article from the source. Find the provenance of the information, because I've done research on this before. I've compared a wire news story to one that was posted on a local news station somewhere in the US. And there were differences. And in this particular example, I found there were some significant differences that changed the whole story. So that's not great. So I want you to be aware of that. And when I mentioned about Security Boulevard, they post a lot of great stuff. If you scroll all the way to the bottom of their articles, you'll see where it originally came from. So just go there, go to the original source. Now, sources it can be a tricky thing, right? You can't, who do you believe? So I gave you some resources here, allsides.com and mediabiasfactcheck.com. Again, nothing is going to be 100% foolproof, so please no one come at me. I'm not saying that these are the be all end all. I'm just trying to give you some tools and give you awareness that you should be checking into these things. All Sides has a good media bias chart that breaks things out to, center, right of center, left of center, etc., to give you an idea of how the information is being presented, what their bias is, what maybe their motivations are. And if someone says to me, "Oh, well, I read this article and I don't see any bias to it," you know what that means? That just means that you agree with the bias of the writer. That's all that means. So you have to be very critical and maybe even look at a site that you might think uh, would not be useful to you, because you do want to get all sides of something, and then it's up to you to sift out, what is pertinent to bring forward. And cite. This is why citations are so important. You didn't just grab that from out of thin air. I don't care in which format you cite something, but you need to have a citation. You need to be able to go back to something. And I'll give you a great example. I despise Wikipedia because even though there's footnotes, more often than not, if you click on one of those footnotes, it will lead to a resource, but that resource won't actually prove the point in which they footnoted. Or the link is broken, because link rot is real because the internet is getting older. So that's the biggest thing that you have to be careful about. Just because something is cited or has a citation, has a footnote to it, you need to actually look at that footnote. Because more often than not, especially Wikipedia, it will not actually answer the thing that they're citing. So keep in mind that. Another one I want to mention is, I actually came across this the other day. I came across this blog, like professional blog looking site called True North. Um, didn't have any advertising on it, and I could kind of tell from the headlines which way they leaned, but I wanted to know for sure. So I went to their About Us page. Follow the money. How is this website funding their news endeavors? You know, Advertising is one thing, like, okay, they have ads. That's how they're getting some of their income, probably subscriptions as well. Well, this True North site had no subscriptions tag that I could see, and no ads. So right away I'm thinking, oh, let's follow the money here. Let's see where this is going. So their About Us page, I found that its parent company is True North Center for Public Policy, which is a registered Canadian charity. So it's basically, calling themselves a think tank, putting out uh, like right of center Canadian viewpoints. Okay, so now that I know, so if I do grab news from that source, I know to then add an asterisk of, this is from, conservative Canadian think tank or something like that. And again, I'm not making judgment, I'm just clarifying. And that's what I think some people kind of get worked up because they think that their views are being attacked. I'm just saying, you need to cite your sources. You need to have people understand where information comes from so that they then can absorb it properly and understand, the positives and negatives that go with finding information online. Another thing that Flavor Flav reminded us about, that, checking the time of a story is very important. I have an example here. There's this photo that went circling around maybe about end of February 2022, when it was 2022, the invasion, right? When Russia invaded Ukraine. And it's a heartwarming photo, right? Two kids, little boy saluting the Ukrainian tank. Yeah, it's a great photo, but it's from 2016. And I actually got into some Twitter fights with folks who were mad at me for pointing out that was an old photo. It's like, what difference does it make? It's for solidarity of Ukraine. Okay, but it's not right. It was for something else entirely. It had nothing to do with the war. So I strongly encourage you, if you're looking at a news item, make sure there's an author. When things are just written by staff, I'm a little like, all right, who really wrote this? Is there a date? Is there a time? Is there other some sort of accountability? If I have to look at the HTML code on your website to try and find when it was posted, you're not doing your job as a news organization. It should be very easy to spot the date and the time for things. There's so many tools out there too that you can try to figure out when maybe a photo was also posted elsewhere and maybe it was from a different time. So don't take things at face value because they could be repurposed to serve an agenda. Next, I want to talk about triangulation. Some of you more techie folks may be familiar with this through like, cell phones and things like that. So I want to tell you a little story about how I did triangulation on my own and how this is important. And what I mean is just I found an art. Okay, so I was on the train in, I guess it was January, a couple of years ago, and I started to see on Twitter, back when Twitter was more normal, that reports of Kobe Bryant was in an accident, was a helicopter crash. And knowing how a lot of rumors are spread and how they're not true, I kind of reserved judgment and feeling and emotion until I was checking news websites. I was on the train, so I had nothing else to do. So I went to the New York Times. I went to the Los Angeles Times because that was local. I also went to TMZ. When it comes to, and then I know this might sound like a joke, but I'm very serious here. When it comes to anything involving a celebrity or a sports, athlete, or even just things in Southern California, TMZ is actually pretty good at having, confirmed interviews with police and reporting news. So I did find something first on TMZ, but then I was like, okay, so unfortunately, it looks like Kobe has passed and 8 other people have passed in this horrible accident. But I kept triangling, kept waiting. I kept waiting. So finally, it took, I think, a half an hour later. Then the New York Times had an article. I'm like, okay, we got two parts now. And I kept waiting for the LA Times. And again, I picked that because of the location. The New York Times I picked because I was working for them at the time, and TMZ because I knew that they would be good with not only Southern California, but also a celebrity. So I didn't share out the news about Kobe Bryant's death personally until I was able to triangulate that information. I didn't want to go off of one source. I wanted to see what other sources who, in my opinion, were reputable, and by most standard opinions are reputable news sources. Um, but I wanted to make sure they were all on the same page. Were they reporting the same information? And everything seemed to check out. Now, I know for some of you might be thinking, like, that sounds like a lot of work. And now keep in mind, for something personal, I was on the train. I literally had nothing else to do. But imagine if this was something for work. You don't want to just take the word of one organization and then run with it without triangulating, and then you document that. I found this source of information on TMZ. I cross referenced it with the New York Times. I cross referenced it with the LA Times, and they are all reporting the same thing. So this is, valid information as we know it. Let's move ahead. So that's what I mean by triangulation. So why is this so important? So when you're consuming information, you actually kind of have to think like a reporter, in my mind. Go through the article, the who, what, where, when, why, how. Is the article answering that? Are they giving you answers? It's fine if they, say like, unknown at this time, developing story, things like that. But when you're consuming information, is it answering those questions? And if something's missing, are you able to confirm it separately on your own? And again, why is this so important to me? Remember, I mentioned that I was a law firm librarian for a long time, and I have a court scene here. I ask everyone in Infosec to pretend like you're doing research as if it needs to be admissible in court. And because that was the case for me for many years, that when I did research, I couldn't, pardon my language, half-ass it. I knew that when I handed over something, there was a pretty darn good chance that lawyer was going to use it in court, and it had to be admissible, it had to be true, it had to be factual, it had to be verifiable. So how this translates to InfoSec is you don't necessarily know if you're going to do research and it's going to get sent up the chain to the board of directors, who could make a multi-million-dollar decision about your company based on your information. And that's really not as far-fetched as it sounds. So you need to act like, is this admissible in court? Is this something that a multi-million dollar decision could be made off of? And I want everyone to take that sort of pride of research, because it helps to then to put crowd, to push out the crowding malinformation that's all around us. So that's something that I think is just really important, and I want people to have that mindset. And citations are important. Again, I don't care if you use MLA or Chicago or just your own style. Have citations for things, whether you just hyperlink to something or you actually write it out. It's really important, because also, if you get asked about something and have to go back, you've lost all your research. Well, where did I find that? I don't know. Or if someone asks you straight up, where did you find that information? Oh no, I forgot, or I don't remember. Well, that doesn't really look good for you, and it doesn't really look good for your research that you spent a lot of hard time working on, and now all of a sudden your research is viewed with suspicion because you can't remember anywhere that you got it from. So I'm saying all of these to you as time savers, as stress avoiders, and just the cold hard fact that you don't know what happens with that information after it leaves your hands. All right, so let's talk about some tools that can help you weed out some of the stuff. I said tools. Okay, thank you, Beavis and Butthead fans. So first, yes, I know it's called X, but if you type in x.com/search hyphen advance, it just goes to twitter.com anyway. So yes, I know it's called X now. Anywho, did you know that Twitter has an advanced search engine? You can do these really specific searches. And again, I can teach a whole hour course on doing a deep dive into Twitter. So I'm just going to give you a little sample here. Here are some sample searches that you can do. You can do this in the little bubble, or you can go to the advanced search page. So I'll point out some of these, lorries, that's a British term for trucks. And BL3 is a postal code for near Bolton, England. So I wanted to know what lorries were near BL3 within 10 miles. And you can get some good traffic reports that way. Usually, if there's an overturned lorry, you can find that out. Um, so Bradley Cooper, for example, I have hashtag Bradley Cooper. He does not have a Twitter handle. Uh, so a lot of times he's referred to it with a hashtag. I know that he speaks French almost fluently. And a lot of times there's more information about him in French publications than English, because he gives a lot of interviews in French. So you can tell Twitter, I only want to search French resources. And they have about, I'm going to say 33 different languages. And on one of their help pages, they have a whole list of all the different 2-letter language codes you need to do that. Uh, Another one you can do is you can say from. You can do the @ sign or not the @ sign. Forward, if they had any recalls. You could also do from $$ capital F space recall, because that's the stock code for forward is just F. So you can search a variety of ways. So you can search terms, until and since, or before and after in Twitter world. So you can really dig down and get some stuff, because I know people just will doom scroll and will just throw spaghetti at the wall and hope for the best. But remember, there's algorithms kind of working against you. They want to show you what has been a paid result, whether it's Twitter or Google. They're going to want to show you popular results and paid results and things like that. So when you go to resources, you don't want top or all those value added results that either were paid for or just were popular. And just because it's popular doesn't necessarily mean that it's good information. You click the next tab over just to results, and it'll list them chronologically. And yeah, that's a little bit more work, but that's also another way for you to avoid the bias of the algorithm, is just show me what you have, don't show me what's in the display window, because I know you're putting that there on purpose. So that's my quick little roundup of how you can dig into Twitter a little bit deeper. Google also has an advanced search. Now, years ago, they used to have a really cool site called Google Labs. If you go to Google Labs now, it's something completely different. But back in the day, I don't know if anybody else remembers, but Google Labs used to be where all these dorking codes were kept. So there's lots of Google dorks out there. You might be aware of some of them. There are so many more. So I encourage you to go to the advanced search to see things. Um, and you can narrow it down a lot. But also, Google's not the be all end all. Spoiler alert, there are other search engines out there in the world. I know Google is very good, but if you are doing something that maybe isn't based in the US and you want to get a more local perspective, you could go to QWANT.com. It's a Europe based search engine that it prides itself on its privacy, but I like it more so because it gets me more in direct contact with local publications from Europe that I might not necessarily be able to get if I do a Google search in the US. And obviously, there's DuckDuckGo and Bing and things like that. What I ultimately recommend that you do is go to the resource searchenginejournal.com, because they're also going to have a breakdown of the pros and cons of each search engine, and may give you advice of, like, if you're heavily interested in doing research in Southeast Asia, here are some search engines that'll serve you better, or here are some apps that'll serve you better. So just keep in mind that there's a whole big world out there of search engines, and just don't always rely on Google to throw your spaghetti at, because there's other ways to go about it. So I want to share with a quick story about Google dorks. True story. Many years ago, when I was a law firm librarian, I came in the morning, and this attorney was just disheveled and bloodshot eyes and everything. And he said, I spent from midnight to 3 a.m. looking for the labor code for the Cayman Islands. Can you find it for me? So, yeah, I go to my computer, blah, 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 do Google Dork. I knew that the government, I knew that the domain for the Cayman Islands, the top level domain is .ky. Just took a guess that their government site would be gov.ky. and knew that they were looking for labor, and I knew that they were a British overseas protectorate, so they spelled labor with a U. So I did labor with a U in quotation marks, and then I did a file search. Again, just with my experience, I had a feeling it was going to be in a PDF. What? Like, that's hard? I found it in 2 seconds. So basically, 15 minutes later, I sent him the information, and he thought I was a hero. Well, I spent like 13 of those minutes getting coffee, getting a Danish, looking at a newspaper, because he told me he was up for 3 hours trying to find this, and I found it in 2 seconds. So I didn't want to make him feel too bad. He already thought I was amazing, find it in 15 minutes. And that leads me to my next point. Do not spend more than 15 minutes searching for something if you keep hitting brick walls. Your time is valuable. I used to have billable time, so I had to be very mindful. I had to keep track of my time spent every 6 minutes. Okay, I do not want to do that ever again. But the thing, and set a timer on your phone, or Google has a timer. And the reason is you don't want to get lost going down a rabbit hole, because you might be following the wrong information. So I usually tell people 15 minutes. This is what we always told the attorneys. Don't spend more than 15 minutes looking for something yourself, because your hourly billing rate is a lot higher than mine as a librarian. And if we're charging the client, let's charge them a lower rate and give them someone who knows how to find things quickly. So yes, I'm sure that attorney did bill 3 hours in the middle of the night for looking for that after I found it quickly. So this is also a good thing for the researcher. Because maybe take a break, go get, take a drink of water or something, like go take a break, or ask someone else, what do you think? This is where I search. And again, that's another one too. When you approach someone else for help, and I say this as someone who worked in many different types of libraries, it's always helpful if the person tells us where you've searched already, so that we can take that into consideration and offer something different. Because how frustrating is it when you ask someone for help and then they just tell you everything you just did and you still didn't find it? So that's not the fault of the person you asked for help. That's your fault, because you didn't even give them a clue as to where you searched. So that's another tip I recommend is, try to keep track of where you go, your pet. There are some tools that help you do with that. But when you go to seek help or get another opinion or something like that, or even when you come back to it later after you take a half an hour break, remind yourself where you already searched, and you can figure out, was that a dead end, or did I not search that properly? LinkedIn is not the best for searches, but you can find some really interesting information here. Um, their search codes seem to change frequently, so you might want to double check that this is working. But this is the last variation of it that I have. So you can go off of this. So I just did a quick search. If you want some fun slash horror show, since we're so close to Halloween, look for how many people have root administrator in their title at LinkedIn. This is a real post. I blacked out the information, not to have everyone go hack this poor person, but don't put things like root administrator in your LinkedIn. Or if you're trying to do a pen test, this is a great search for a pen test to see if anybody in the company's IT department has something done like this publicly exposed. So I just wanted to show that to this crowd. Okay, I'm trying to hurry up here. We just had a couple more slides. So I want you to all be like sleepy kitties and rest knowing that the news isn't stressing you out. Your mileage may vary on the usefulness you get out of some of these, but Google News alerts are great ways to really refine. You can use those Google Dorks to really refine what you're looking for. Some apps are called Flipboard and Pocket that are really good for saving information. Flipboard, I often see cybersecurity news that I don't see in other places, so I recommend that. News aggregators, there's lots of them, and also just set up specific times for search. And this is more so for your own personal thing, right? And, personal time. If you're a news junkie, that's great, but that can also make you a little nuts. So maybe, rather than doom scrolling all the time, maybe just set aside a specific time of like, okay, I'm going to spend, X amount of time looking at stuff, and then I'm going to stop because I'm going to waste 4 hours scrolling through things. So this is where a lot of the alerts and the apps and alerts and things like that can really help you, because it'll help narrow down what you're really focused on, so you're not just trying to surf a tsunami of all the information. So just a couple parting thoughts here. Think. This is usually described to folks of, before you post something, does it hit these? But I also like to use this from the other direction, from a research. Then if you find something, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Those those words might look different based on what you're researching, but it's also kind of a good guide, is to distinguish from a real news source versus a slam piece. What is it that they're really trying to accomplish? Are they trying to put true information out there or not? So think is a nice way to think about it. True, helpful, inspiring, necessary, kind. And lastly, as Tatiana taught us in RuPaul Drag Race, what you see isn't always the truth. So arm yourself with the tools and the patience and the know-how, because you're going to be an excellent researcher and provide excellent reports and excellent information, and that's really going to help you make your mark in this industry. So the slides can be distributed. I have some tools here. Shameless plug for my blog. I have part of my blog that I dedicate to resources where I evaluate them and vet them. So I have about 31 different sources there that I've done. I'm still updating it as I can. But if you want to deep dive on a certain resource, check it out there. And I apologize for the delay and the technical issues. Thank you for having me. I've been Tracy Maleef, Infosec Sherpa, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Do we have time for questions, or do I need to shove off? The Google fact check link. Yes, Chris Y. I can do that. Hold on one second. So I was looking through my slides here. Where'd it go? Oh, it was this page. Here we go. Wait, what was this? I ran into librarians at law school. They were amazing, know how to find things. Yes. So funny story when I can't get the thing to. I'll share the slides, Chris. I can't seem to get the things to copy. Yeah. You said, yeah, about the librarians at law school. Yeah, I was going to note, I was going to say my very first InfoSec conference, still as a librarian, it was ShmooCon. And I was actually very nervous to say that I was a librarian because I still hadn't made the career transition to InfoSec yet. And I was kind of scared. I didn't know if people were going to make fun of me or whatever. So at the end of a session, there was a question that was kind of related to my library background. So I mentioned that, and I remember like people were excited. They were like, "Oh, you know how to find stuff." And like librarians are awesome. And to me, I don't think anyone will really understand how much it meant to me that that was the reaction of you know how to find stuff. Because too often when people hear me say that I was a librarian, they think that I read books at story time to young children. No, I just had to mediate disputes between attorneys acting like young children. But um, being recognized for the fact of being able to find information and organize it is really, meant a lot to me because that's what a librarian does, and then that can look in different forms. So yes, I just somehow knew that my library and information science skill set would be useful in information security and cybersecurity. So about 7 years ago, I made my big career change. So oh, there's a funny link in there, but uh, oh, sorry, I'm reading Elliot's thing. Okay, yeah, I'll stick around for any other questions, and I can also just babble with more stories of things. Yeah, I mean, and this can be difficult in times. I'm not saying that it's easy, because I know a lot of the things that I mention as tips. I know I've seen the eye rolls. I know, I know what I'm saying and what I'm asking people to do can be a lot, but it's really for your own benefit. Do you want to be known as the researcher who offers up bad information? I don't. Um, I like the idea of story time with Tracy. Yeah. Oh my God. Between being a travel agent and a librarian, I have some amazing stories. Um, oh, you know what? I forgot to include it on my slides, but when I was pulling those photos of my relatives, I found the postcard that my uncle wrote. Oh, I have. Do I have it up here? Basically, it was a postcard of Fort Meade, so which I think a lot of you are familiar with. It was a postcard from 1940. It was March 1942. The postcard was of Fort Meade, and my uncle wrote something like, "I hope you might be surprised to know that uh, basically I enlisted in the army, and I was inducted on Saturday. I'll write again soon." That's how he told his family he joined the army. And my uncle Bob was actually one of the first, I want to say 15 or 16 army soldiers who were put through. Sorry, I'm blanking on the name. The first SIGINT school. Um, it's a very interesting story. So yeah, he was involved with SIGINT his whole career, and he was one of the first ones to kick it off. Um, so true story of like we'd go to visit him in Virginia, and I remember coloring. I was really little. I had a coloring book, and I was coloring on the floor, and I just remember saying to him like, "Uncle Bob, tell me stories about World War II," and without taking his eyes off the TV, he goes, "You don't have the clearance, kid." And I thought he was joking. And so I started laughing. I looked at him, and he looked at me directly, and he goes, "I'm serious. You don't have the clearance." I was like 10. so so fast forward to later in his life when finally things were declassified. We had a big family gathering. He called everyone to Northern Virginia. By this time he was in his early 90s, towards the end of his life, and a lot of the stuff that he had worked on had finally been declassified. So he wanted a big family picnic, and he sat around and he told stories. And I'm sorry, I'm going to get choked up with this one. So this was when I was beginning my career pivot into infosec, and I said to him, Uncle Bob, I wanted to tell you something. I said, I started, to change careers. I'm going to work in cybersecurity and information security. And he was a little deaf at that point, so it took like a minute for him to hear what I said. And all of a sudden, this big broad smile came across his face, and he said, "That's my girl," and that meant the world to me. So yeah, that's why I have SIGINT has a special place in my heart, because my uncle did so much with them. He wrote newsletters for his fellow SIGINT uh, veterans years, and also sent it to me as well. Um, yeah, he was just amazing. My grandfather escaped from Europe to come to the U.S., and the first thing he did was join the army. Which the funny part is that his parents left Europe so that he wouldn't have to fight in World War One. And the first thing he does, he goes and signs up for the army. Um, and the family story about that is he was on a ship to France when the war ended, and just never even set foot in Europe. Uh, I'm that again. That's just the family lore. But the family lore is he was on a ship when the war ended, and they turned around. So we have some great photos of him in uniform, but apparently he never saw anything other than training camp in like Florida or North Carolina or something like that. Um, and I can tell you another funny military story again with my nephew. He was supposed to come home for Thanksgiving one year, and it was a couple days before Thanksgiving. I got a call from him, and he said, "I'm really sorry, I'm not going to be able to come home for Thanksgiving." I'm like, "Oh, what happened?" He's like, "I'm getting shipped out." And me being a dummy, go, "Where are you going?" And there's just silence. I'm like, and then in hindsight, I'm like, why did I ask that question? So again, still not getting it. Well, kind of getting it. I go, "Oh, wait, does it rhyme with Afghanistan?" And there's still silence. And I'm like, okay, never mind, be safe. So anyway, fast forward to a couple days later, I get a call from him again, and he goes, "Aunt Tracy, please never do that again." He's like, "I was a couple feet away from my CEO, and you're asking me if I'm going to Afghanistan." Like, sorry, hun. um, just things, funny things like that. My nephew would call me, and I used to live near a naval air base, and there was a helicopter overhead, and he got very concerned. He was like, "Why is there a Huey above you?" And I'm like, "What?" and he was just getting really frustrated, and he's like, "Aunt Tracy, look up." I'm like, "Oh, look, there's a helicopter." And he starts describing it to me like to a T, and I was really impressed. I was like, "Wow, Sean," I'm like, "How did you get that just from the sound through the cell phone?" And there's silence, and he's like, "That's my job, Aunt Tracy." So I hope you're enjoying these little tidbits of stories. But if anybody has any research questions, I'm happy to answer that. And I don't want to take up all your break time. Oh, Christopher Prue just put a funny story in chat. All right. Well, if nobody has any other questions, I don't need to bore you with my family stories, but I'll get the slides shared. And yeah, I'm Infosec Sherpa on most social media. Feel free to connect with me. Happy to do other talks to help people become better researchers. And thank you for inviting me to present. And again, my sincere apologies about the technical issues. Now I have to find out what's wrong with that other laptop. Oh, yes. Question. Is it Yael or Yale? Yeah, that's what. Okay, that was my first thought. Okay. Yes, Yael. And what's your question? Mhm. Or if you want to contact me offline, yeah. Oh, here you go. Oh, Okay. So file sharing, like the thoughts and opinions about how to share file. Oh boy, I don't know. I have enough time to fully answer that right now. Um, and that's yeah, that's kind of more of a cybersecurity question. Yeah, yeah, yeah. If I can get, that's a really long, kind of complicated answer. But I mean, yeah, the quick answer is, obviously, having some sort of, I would say like zero trust involved. Um, I'm always wary about people using DocuSign because of how often it's like like if you're using it with clients because of how often it's used with phishing, things like that. So yeah, why don't we connect like on LinkedIn or something, and we can kind of hash that out. I'm sorry I don't have a quick answer for you, but it's an excellent question. I just don't have enough time to answer it fully, so and I should log off and let people have their break time. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks everyone. I'm going to sign off now, and please connect with me later if you have any other thoughts or questions.